All right, so welcome back to the deep dive. I've got to say, I'm really excited about what we're digging into today. You sent over some really interesting stuff on this blockchain platform called Pactus. And, well, the more I look into it, the more I think this could be like a real game changer.
Yeah, no, Pactus is definitely trying to shake things up in the blockchain world for sure. They're addressing some of the biggest issues we see with existing platforms, things like scalability and complexity, even concerns about centralization that have been popping up more and more.
So Pactus coming in swinging, huh? Okay, well, their website at least makes it seem pretty user-friendly. I mean, they've even got this GUI application, which I think is a huge deal. Not everyone wants to be messing around with command lines. Right.
Right, totally. Accessibility is a big part of what they're going for. They want to make blockchain tech, easy for anyone to use, regardless of their technical background. But I think where Pactus really sets itself apart is their consensus mechanism, solid state proof of stake, or SSPOS for short.
Okay, SSPOS. Yeah, that's the part that really caught my eye, too. Because it's different from the usual proof-of-work systems like Bitcoin, which we all know are, let's face it, energy hogs. And it's not just about being more efficient, is it?
Exactly. Pactus also avoids some of the pitfalls that other proof-of-stake systems fall into, particularly this issue of delegation. Have you ever come across that term before?
To be honest, not really. What's the big deal of delegation anyway?
Well, so in some proof-of-stake systems, you have to delegate your voting power to someone else, kind of like, choosing a representative. This can lead to centralization, where a small group of these really powerful players end up controlling the whole network, which kind of defeats the purpose. But Pactus gets around this by having, well, everyone directly participate in the consensus process.
Ah, so everyone has a voice at the table. I like that.
Exactly. They actually use this analogy of a community bank, which I think is pretty helpful. You become a validator by putting up some of your pay key coins, that's Pactus's native currency, by the way. Then it's like a group of neighbors taking turns managing the bank's ledger. One proposes a bundle of transactions, the others check it over, vote on it, and if there's a supermajority in favor, boom, it's added to the blockchain.
Okay, so kind of like a neighborhood watch for the blockchain.
Yeah.
Like it. But walk me through this whole SSPOS thing a little more, this propose, prepare, pre-commit stuff. It's still a bit fuzzy for me.
Sure. Yeah, let's break it down. So it all goes back to that community bank analogy, right? One validator proposes a transaction bundle, just like someone might propose a deposit or withdrawal at a bank. That's the propose phase.
Okay, I'm with you so far. Then what?
Then other validators jump in to check it over, make sure everything adds up, make sure no one's trying to pull a fast one. They're basically saying, yep, this looks good to me. That's the prepare step.
So it's like a built-in system of checks and balances.
Exactly. Now, if more than 2/3 of the validators agree that the proposed block is valid, they move on to the pre-commit phase, which is essentially like locking in their votes.
So they're really making sure everyone's on the same page before anything gets, permanently added to the blockchain. Got it.
Exactly. And once that supermajority reaches that pre-commit stage, well, then the block is officially added to the chain and they move on to the next round.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get the picture here. But what happens if, let's say, the validator who's supposed to propose a block suddenly disappears? Does the whole system grind to a halt?
That's a great question, and actually Pactus has a pretty clever solution for that. It's called the change proposer phase. So if a validator doesn't propose a block within a specific time frame, the other validators can step in and choose a new proposer.
That's smart. So it's like, hey, if you're not going to do your job, we'll find someone else who will.
Right, exactly. The system is designed to keep humming along, even if there are, some hiccups here and there. But I get it, all this talk of supermajorities and checks and balances, it does sound a bit complicated.
It does. So how can we be sure that this whole process is secure and, actually works the way it's supposed to?
Well, Pactus has taken a really interesting approach here. They've used something called TLA plus A, which is a formal specification language. It's basically a way of representing their consensus algorithm mathematically, so they can really test it out and find any potential vulnerabilities.
So it's like they've built this mathematical model of their system to make sure it's, rock solid.
Precisely. And it's not just about finding bugs. It's about ensuring that the logic of the system is sound and that it will behave as expected, even in some unexpected situations.
Boy, that is reassuring. I'm always a bit skeptical when things sound a little too good to be true.
Mm-hmm.
But tell me more about this committee that's actually doing all this proposing and validating.
Right. So Pactus has this committee of 51 validators that governs the block creation process. But, and here's where things get really interesting, The membership of this committee is constantly changing, thanks to a process called sortition.
Sortition. Okay, that's a new one.
Think of it like a lottery, where your chances of winning are proportional to the number of coins you've staked. Essentially, sortition uses cryptography to randomly select validators to be on the committee, and the more coins you stake, well, the higher your chance of getting chosen.
Ah, so it's not just a free-for-all. There's a system in place to make sure that the committee is, representative of the overall distribution of staked coins. But doesn't that mean someone with a ton of coins could just buy their way onto the committee and just, control everything?
That's a valid concern, but the sortition algorithm is designed to prevent that kind of manipulation. It uses a verifiable random function, or VRF, which is basically this cryptographic tool that makes the selection process completely transparent and auditable. Think of it like a digital version of those lottery balls that get mixed up in a transparent container so you can see that everything is fair.
Okay, so cryptography is the key to making sure that the committee selection is random and fair. But how do they actually decide who gets to propose a block at any given time? Do they, draw straws or something?
It's actually more structured than that, but also very simple. They have this deterministic rotation system. Each member of the committee gets a turn to propose a block, and then the role just passes on to the next validator in line, going in a clockwise fashion.
So everyone gets a chance to be in the driver's seat, so to speak. But wait, if new validators are constantly joining the committee through this sortition process, doesn't that make the rotation a bit chaotic?
That's where the rules come in. When a new validator joins the committee, they get slotted in right before the current proposer. And to make sure the committee stays at a consistent 51 members, the validator who's been there the longest gets rotated out.
So it's like a revolving door of validators, but with a clear system for who gets to propose when. That's a really neat way to keep things moving. But I'm still a little hung up on this security question. Couldn't someone with enough coins just, game the system somehow?
Well, keep in mind that to actually control the system, an attacker would need to control more than 2/3 of the committee's voting power.
Right, that supermajority requirement we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
But couldn't someone just, buy up the ton of coins and stake them to get that kind of control?
Theoretically, yes, but it would be incredibly difficult and expensive to pull off. Pactus actually did some analysis using something called the Poisson distribution. I won't get into all the technical details, but basically it shows that even if an attacker had, let's say, 10% of all the coins, they could only expect to have, on average, 2 validators on the committee at any given time.
2 out of 51, that's hardly enough to stage a coup.
Exactly. And with larger committee sizes, which Pactus is aiming for as they grow, the probability of an attacker gaining control becomes even smaller. So while it's theoretically possible, the system is designed to make it, extremely improbable.
Okay, that does make me feel a little better. It sounds like Pactus has put a lot of thought into making the system secure. But you mentioned earlier that PAC is the native currency of Pactus, right? And I have to admit, something about the total supply of those coins really piqued my curiosity.
Oh, you noticed that, did you? Well, prepare to have your curiosity satisfied, because this is where things get a little, a little bit quirky.
Okay, now you've really got my attention. What's the deal with these Passy coins?
Well, there's a fixed total supply of Pass coins, 42 million to be exact, and that number wasn't chosen randomly. The Pactus team drew inspiration from a, rather famous source, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Wait, you're telling me they chose the total supply of their cryptocurrency based on The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? That's unexpected, to say the least.
It is, isn't it? But it's a perfect example of how the Pactus team blends, the serious technology with a touch of whimsy. And it makes sense, right? After all, 42 is the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything, according to the guide.
Okay, that's amazing. I love that they have a sense of humor about all this. It definitely makes them stand out from the crowd. But tell me more about how these 42 million coins are distributed. Who gets them?
Well, they're divided into 2 categories, Genesis coins and block rewards. The Genesis coins, which make up half the total supply, were allocated when the project, first started.
Okay, so where did those initial coins go?
They were split amongst 5 categories: the Treasury, the Pactus Foundation, VC allocation, the team, and the community.
So a mix of supporting the development of the platform, rewarding early investors and the team, and, this is the part I like, giving the community a stake in the project's success.
Exactly. Pactus is very much about community involvement, but we should also talk about the block rewards too, because that's how new PAC coins come into existence.
Well, I was just wondering about that. So how does that work?
So every time a new block is added to the blockchain, One packed coin is created and given to the validator who proposed that block.
So that's the incentive for validators to participate in the process and keep the blockchain secure. Makes sense. But is that separate from the transaction fees that users pay?
Absolutely. The block rewards come from this special account called the Treasury, which started with 21 million packed coins. As new blocks are created, one coin is transferred from the Treasury to the validator who proposed the block. It's like a built-in mechanism for, funding the security of the network.
Interesting. So it's kind of like this self-sustaining system in a way, with new coins being minted as the blockchain grows. But I'm curious about something else now.
What's that?
Well, we've talked a lot about how Pactus works, and it's really impressive, I gotta say. But how does this all fit into the bigger picture? What are they ultimately trying to achieve with all this?
That's a great question, and it takes us to the next phase of our deep dive, Pactus's roadmap for the future.
Okay, so let's shift gears and talk about Pactus plans.
Mm.
They've got this roadmap with 4 phases, right? Alpha, beta, gamma, and delta.
That's right. And as of now, we're actually in the gamma phase, which kicked off with the launch of the Pactus mainnet back in January 2024.
Okay, so gamma phase. What's been happening so far?
Well, they've already hit some pretty impressive milestones, like reaching over 2,000 community validators. That shows you there's some real momentum behind this project.
Wow, 2,000 validators, that is a big deal. So they're definitely gaining traction. But what's the focus of this gamma phase? What are they working on right now?
Well, a big part of it is expanding the platform's usability and accessibility, which is key to attracting a wider audience. They've released a bunch of new tools and features like a command line interface, a desktop and mobile-friendly GUI, and even a browser extension wallet.
So they're really living up to that user-friendly promise.
They are. But what's really exciting is what's coming next. They're planning this major upgrade to their consensus algorithm called PIP10, which stands for Pactus Improvement Proposal Number 10.
PIP10. Sounds kind of ominous. What's the big deal with this upgrade?
It's all about speed. They're aiming to make Pactus's consensus process even faster, potentially making it the fastest decentralized blockchain among all proof-of-stake systems.
Wow, that's a bold claim. But
Yeah.
if they can pull it off, it would definitely be a huge advantage. Who doesn't want faster transactions, right?
Exactly. And on top of the consensus upgrade, they're also working on a browser extension wallet, which will make it even easier for people to manage their pack coins and interact with decentralized applications.
Okay, so lots of cool stuff happening in the gamma phase. But you mentioned earlier that the really exciting stuff is coming later. What can you tell me about the delta phase?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The Delta phase is all about bringing smart contracts and decentralized storage to Pactus. That's where the platform's true potential starts to unfold. But let's save that conversation for part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay, you've definitely left me hanging. I can't wait to hear more about those smart contracts and decentralized storage.
Don't worry, we'll get to all of that in just a moment. But first, let's take a quick pause.
All right, we're back, and I am ready to dive into this delta phase. Smart contracts and decentralized storage, it feels like we're stepping into the future here.
It's definitely where a lot of the excitement is focused right now. And what's fascinating about Pactus's approach is that they're not just trying to copy what everyone else is doing. They're really emphasizing simplicity and decentralization as core principles.
So it's not just about jumping on the bandwagon, it's about doing it the Pactus way. Tell me more about how they're planning to handle these smart contracts.
Well, their vision is to create a system that's, easy to understand and use, even for people who aren't blockchain experts. They want to make creating and deploying smart contracts accessible to a much wider audience.
That's a pretty ambitious goal, considering most smart contract platforms out there are, well, pretty intimidating for anyone who's not a developer.
Yeah.
What's Pactus doing differently to make things easier?
A big part of it is their focus on user-friendly tools. They're planning to integrate smart contracts right into their GUI so you can manage and deploy them without having to mess around with, complicated command line interfaces.
So it's that same visual, intuitive approach that we talked about earlier. No need to be a coding wizard to harness the power of smart contracts on Pactus.
Exactly. And they're also planning to integrate smart contracts with their browser extension wallet, so interacting with decentralized applications will be super convenient.
Okay, so they're making it easy to create, deploy, and use smart contracts. But what about the storage aspect? Where does decentralized storage fit into all of this?
That's where things get really, really interesting. Pactus is planning to launch this decentralized storage platform that works, hand in hand with their smart contract system. Imagine being able to store data securely on the blockchain and then use smart contracts to control who has access to it and automate these complex processes.
Whoa, okay, now my mind is actually starting to spin a little bit. Give me some real-world examples. How could this combination of decentralized storage and smart contracts be used in practice?
The possibilities are pretty mind-boggling. Think about supply chain management. You could use Pactus to track goods from their origin all the way to the consumer, ensuring transparency and accountability every step of the way. Or think about healthcare patient records could be stored securely on the blockchain, giving people more control over their own data.
And with smart contracts, you could even automate things like, insurance claims or prescription refills based on those records.
Precisely. Or what about digital identity? You could store your identity credentials on the blockchain and then use smart contracts to grant, specific service providers access to the information they need without having to share everything.
That would be a game changer for privacy and security online. No more handing over your sensitive information to every website and app you use.
Exactly. These are just a few examples, and we're really just scratching the surface of what's possible when combine the power of smart contracts and decentralized storage.
It all sounds incredible, but I have to ask about the technical side of things. How exactly are they planning to implement this decentralized storage system?
Well, the white paper doesn't go into a ton of detail about the specifics, but they do mention that users will be able to purchase dedicated storage files that can be renewed annually.
So it's kind of like renting a virtual storage locker on the blockchain.
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
And this approach could help them overcome some of the scalability issues that other decentralized storage platforms have faced.
Right. It's all about finding that balance between security, accessibility, and cost effectiveness. But with all these, ambitious plans for smart contracts, decentralized storage, and this faster consensus algorithm, how can they ensure that the platform remains stable and secure as it evolves?
That's where their commitment to community-driven development comes in. Pactus puts a huge emphasis on transparency and collaboration. They encourage community members to submit proposals, participate in discussions, and help shape the direction of the project.
So it's not just a small group of developers calling all the shots. It's more like a collective effort with everyone having a voice.
Exactly. And they've also been really proactive in using formal verification techniques to ensure the correctness of their code. Remember that TLA plus specification we talked about earlier? That kind of rigor helps build confidence in the platform's reliability.
It's great that they're not cutting corners when it comes to security and stability. It's all too easy for projects to get caught up in the hype and rush things without proper testing and oversight.
Absolutely. And it's not just about preventing bugs and vulnerabilities. It's about creating a system that can adapt and evolve in the face of, unforeseen challenges. The blockchain space is constantly changing, so platforms need to be resilient and able to handle the unexpected.
Okay, so they're focusing on user-friendly tools, community-driven development, and rigorous testing to make these smart contract and decentralized storage plans a reality. But what's the big picture vision here? What does Pactus ultimately hope to achieve with all of this?
Their white paper talks about creating a platform that empowers individuals and fosters innovation. They want to build a future where anyone can easily create, share, and exchange value and data in a secure and transparent way.
So it's not just about technology for technology's sake. It's about using technology to create a more equitable and decentralized world.
Precisely. Pactus is trying to lay the foundation for a new kind of internet, one that's owned by the people, not by giant corporations.
That's a powerful vision. But let's be realistic for a moment. There are a lot of blockchain projects out there with, lofty goals, but not all of them succeed. What are some of the potential roadblocks that Pactus might face as it tries to, bring this vision to life?
Well, one challenge is simply the sheer complexity of building a secure and scalable blockchain platform. There are a lot of moving parts, and it's easy for things to go wrong.
Right. We've seen plenty of examples of blockchain projects that have been, plagued by technical issues, security breaches, or just like bad design. Not every project can live up to its promises.
Exactly. And even if Pactus can overcome the technical hurdles, there's also the challenge of adoption. For any blockchain platform to succeed, it needs to attract a critical mass of users and developers.
That's the network effects, right? The more people who use it, the more valuable it becomes.
Yeah.
But how does Pactus plan to stand out in such a, crowded and competitive space?
Well, their focus on user-friendliness could be a key differentiator. By making it easy for anyone to interact with the blockchain, they're lowering the barrier to entry.
That makes sense.
Hmm.
But there are other user-friendly blockchains out there. What else does Pactus have going for it?
Their unique consensus mechanism, SSPOS, could give them an edge in terms of speed and efficiency. And their commitment to community-driven development could foster a strong and loyal user base.
Okay, so it's a combination of factors: user-friendliness, speed, and community. But ultimately, success will depend on whether Pactus can deliver on its promises and build a platform that truly empowers individuals.
Exactly. It's still early days, but Pactus has laid out an ambitious roadmap. It'll be fascinating to watch their journey and see if they can achieve their goals.
I agree. But before we get too lost in the future, let's bring things back to the present. What does all of this mean for you, the listener? Why should you care about Pactus?
That's the key question, isn't it? I think the main takeaway here is that Pactus represents a potential paradigm shift in how we think about the internet and how we interact with technology.
It's about moving away from these centralized platforms that are controlled by a handful of, powerful companies and towards a more decentralized and equitable future.
Exactly. And whether or not Pactus ultimately succeeds, their vision is something worth paying attention to.
Okay, so Pactus is aiming to create a decentralized internet powered by smart contracts and decentralized storage. That's a pretty big deal. But what can our listener do if they want to learn more about Pactus or even, get involved with the project?
The first step is to head over to their website, pactus.org. You can find all sorts of information there, including the full white paper, technical documentation, and links to their community forums.
And if you're feeling adventurous, you can even download their GUI application and start running your own Pactus node.
Exactly. Or if you prefer a more, hands-off approach, you can simply buy some packed coins and support the project that way.
Okay, so there are plenty of ways to get involved, depending on your level of interest and, technical expertise. But before we wrap things up, I have one final question for you.
I'm all ears.
Imagine for a moment that Pactus achieves everything it sets out to do. They build a secure, scalable, and user-friendly platform that empowers individuals and fosters a truly decentralized internet. What do you think the world would look like in that scenario?
That's a fascinating question. If Pactus succeeds, I think we could see a profound shift in, how we interact with technology and with each other.
We could see a world where individuals have more control over their own data, where online interactions are more transparent and accountable, and where innovation flourishes outside the walls of these giant corporations.
Exactly. It's a world where the power of the internet is truly in the hands of the people. It's an exciting vision and one that's worth striving for.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you, our listener, with that thought to ponder.
Hmm.
What new possibilities could open up if Pactus achieves its ambitious goals?
Mm.
What could a truly decentralized internet mean for you, for your community, for the world?
Yeah, it really is an inspiring vision, isn't it? This whole idea of a more decentralized and equitable internet. But like you've said, there are always challenges along the way. And with any new tech, especially one that's aiming to be so foundational, it's really important to consider the potential risks as well.
Right. We don't want to get too swept up in all the excitement without taking a hard look at the potential downsides. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about some of the things that could go wrong. What are some of the risks that you see with a platform like Pactus?
Well, one concern that always comes to mind with any system that relies on, cryptography and these distributed networks is security. I mean, we've seen examples of other blockchains being hacked, sometimes with like millions of dollars being stolen. So Pactus absolutely has to prioritize security at every stage of its development.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
They need to make sure that their code is like bulletproof, their consensus mechanism is robust, and their network is designed to, withstand attacks. But even with the best security measures in place, there's always the human element to consider.
That's right. People can be the weakest link. Users might fall victim to phishing scams, or developers might accidentally introduce, vulnerabilities into the code. So education and awareness are like essential.
So it's not just about building a secure system. It's about creating a culture of security within the Pactus community.
Exactly. Another potential risk is, and this is kind of ironic, centralization. I mean, one of the main goals of these decentralized platforms is to avoid that concentration of power that we see with these traditional tech giants, right? But there's always a danger that that new forms of centralization could emerge, even in a system that's designed to be decentralized.
So it's like this game of whack-a-mole. You solve one centralization problem and then another one pops up somewhere else. How could centralization creep into a platform like Pactus?
Well, for example, if a small group of validators ends up controlling a majority of the stake coins, they could potentially have an outsized influence on the network. Or if the development of the platform becomes too concentrated in the hands of, let's say, a small team, it could lose that community-driven spirit.
Those are good points. It seems like Pactus needs to be very intentional about maintaining a diverse and active validator set.
Yeah.
And they need to make sure that the development process stays open and transparent.
Absolutely. Transparency and open source principles are essential for preventing those kinds of power imbalances. The more people who can review the code, contribute ideas, and participate in decision making, the better. But there's another potential risk that we haven't talked about yet, and it's a big one: regulation.
Right. Governments around the world are still trying to figure out how to, you know, regulate cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology. It's a bit of a wild west out there right now.
It is, and that regulatory uncertainty creates a lot of challenges for projects like Pactus. They need to be flexible and adaptable enough to adjust to, new rules and regulations, which can be tricky when those rules are constantly changing or even contradictory.
Exactly. It's a tough balancing act. On the one hand, they want to create a platform that's open and accessible to everyone, but on the other hand, they need to be mindful of legal and regulatory constraints. And those constraints might vary depending on, where you are in the world, which adds another layer of complexity.
It's a global challenge, and there's no easy solution. But I think it's important for Pactus to be, proactive about engaging with regulators and policymakers, trying to work within the existing legal frameworks as much as possible.
Transparency and collaboration seem to be like key themes here, not just with the community, but also with regulators.
Definitely. But there's one more risk that I think sometimes gets overlooked in all the excitement about the potential of blockchain tech: the environmental impact.
Right. Some consensus mechanisms like proof of work use a ton of energy. Bitcoin mining, for example, consumes as much electricity as like some small countries. There's been a lot of concern about the carbon footprint of these systems.
Yeah.
But Pactus uses proof of stake, right? That's supposed to be much more energy efficient.
It is, and that's a big plus for Pactus. But it's still important to be mindful of energy consumption, especially as the platform grows and more transactions are processed.
So they need to make sure they're using renewable energy sources for their operations. Yeah. And constantly looking for ways to optimize their tech to be as energy efficient as possible. It's not just about building a better internet. It's about building a better future for the planet.
Absolutely. And I think this brings us to a really important point. We've talked about the potential benefits and the potential risks of Pactus, but ultimately the future of this platform and of decentralized tech as a whole is, well, it's in our hands. It's up to us to decide what kind of future we want to create.
It's up to the users, the developers, the validators, the community, and even the regulators. We all have a role to play in shaping this new technological landscape.
And to do that well, we need to be, informed and engaged. We need to ask tough questions, demand transparency, and hold those in power accountable.
It's not about blindly embracing or rejecting new technology, right? It's about understanding both its potential and its limitations, and working together to create a future that benefits everyone.
Well said. I think that captures the essence of what Pactus is trying to do.
And on that note, we'll leave you, our listener, with a final thought to ponder. As you continue to explore the world of Pactus and of blockchain technology more broadly, remember to, stay curious, keep learning, and keep engaging. The future is being written right now, and your voice matters. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Pactus. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.